Herzlich willkommen zu unserem Talk von anderen lernen, Singapurs Bildungserfolg. Seit mehreren Jahren gilt Singapur nun schon als Vorbild für internationale Schulsysteme. Auch auf den internationalen Standards performt Singapur immer extrem gut und auch immer besser. Aber ob das System auch negative Seiten hat und wie dieses System überhaupt dahin gekommen ist, können wir heute mit dem wohl führenden Bildungsexperten aus Singapur, Pak Tee Ng, besprechen. Pak Tee ist vor allem als Researcher tätig im National Institute for Education in Singapur, hat selber langjährige Erfahrung im Bildungsbereich und bringt jedes Jahr wieder neue Erkenntnisse aus Singapurs Bildungssystem auf die internationale Bühne. Pak Tee, thank you so much for taking the time to be with us today and to answer all our questions. But before we get to that, I hear that you've prepared something for us so we all understand what the current situation in Singapore is like.
Okay, thank you very much, Anna. So what I'll do is to now share my screen. Okay, thank you very much for having me here.
Perfect. This looks great.
Okay, so hello everyone. I'm Pak Tee Ng from Singapore. Thank you very much for inviting me here to speak about the success factors of Singapore's education system. Now, first, I have to clarify that our system is always a work in progress. So while we have some success, like any other system, we still have more challenges than we have solutions. But I'll explain why educational change is so necessary to Singapore and indeed to many other jurisdictions, even when we seem to be quite successful. So I'll start with some introductory remarks, then the conversation with Anna, and then followed by Q&A. Now, before I tell the Singapore story, perhaps I should begin with where Singapore is. So could you locate it on the globe? So of course I can't see you, so just use your finger to point on your screen. Could you see Singapore? So 10 seconds, just try, okay? All right, could you actually see Singapore? So I'm just doing this for you. Actually, Singapore is just a dot on the map. On this map, you probably cannot see it unless you really have bionic eyes. Singapore is a very small country near the equator in Southeast Asia, with an island less than 50 kilometers on the longer axis and 40 kilometers on the shorter axis. Now we have 5 million people on the small island. Many of you, or perhaps some of you, would have landed in our Changi airport if you are on your way between Europe and Australia. So we run a system of public schools in Singapore that are funded by the government. Class size is about 35 to 40. Now, in case you wish to compare Singapore to Austria, so there you go. Now, the figures are, of course, just approximations. So you could see how small Singapore really is in terms of land size. And therefore, with 5 million people, we are a very densely populated country. Now, the event organizers have asked me to speak briefly about the success factors of Singapore. So in my book, Learning from Singapore, The Power of Paradoxes, I wrote that Singapore is always looking for timely change. It is also hanging on dearly to some timeless constants. Singapore is a land where change and continuity coexist and are equally valued. This, I think, is one of our success factors. The Singapore story is about timely change, timeless constants, even during the current pandemic. We are willing to make changes and we're willing to stick with some basic principles. By the way, my book says learning from Singapore. It is not that Singapore is that good. Please learn from Singapore. My book says it brings to the world the learning from Singapore, what we have learned from our 50 plus years of trying to reform and improve our education system. So what is timely change and timeless constants? Timely change is about keeping up with the times and staying ahead of the curve. For example, COVID-19 has changed many things, and obviously we have to adapt very quickly. But when change is the only constant, then one real change is to look for constants that should not change. These timeless constants are our beacons, necessary for us to stay rooted to our identities as we navigate the turbulent waters of change so that we do not lose ourselves or our sense of mission. So let me start with timely change. Singapore's education system seems to be doing quite well, at least from international comparative tests. Then why the need for change? Well, times have changed, and education has to keep up with the times. In the past, we call it a quotable quote. Today, it is a tweetable tweet. So can someone tweet this, please? Today, we take a phone and we swipe a phone. In the past, do you remember? We actually dial a phone. Times have changed. But the big question is, why change when one is successful? This is the Singapore psychology. It is always better to change from a position of strength rather than one of desperation. When we are doing okay, it is actually a good time to change. We can change in a reflective and calibrated manner on a solid footing when we are actually doing okay. If we do not change, we may be forced to change when we are desperate. So what are we trying to change in Singapore? We are trying to move from quantity to quality, from a focus on exam results and key performance indicators to the quality of learning and interaction in the classroom. In particular, we are emphasizing thinking, appreciation of subject, creativity, enjoyment, engagement, joy of learning, more and different pathways of success, citizenship, character education, student well-being, learning for life rather than examinations, and self-directed and self-regulated learning. Merely as an example, now there is a big difference between a child who can play Mozart in the piano exams flawlessly, but actually hates the piano exams and hates playing, versus a child who truly appreciates playing Mozart, who will eventually become a real concert pianist. So that is where we are going. We can have good exam results, but that is not enough. We hope that our children actually enjoys and appreciates what they learn. Then COVID-19 struck. So one of the most obvious change is that we are now much more used to online learning. Now, during our own circuit breaker period, which was April to June last year, when home-based learning was implemented in the whole country, teachers carried on teaching and learning using online learning tools. Now, given the sudden change, schools and teachers really rose to the occasion. Many teachers have learned how to operate the tools. Now, some, of course, more competently than others. They continue to teach, make calls to their students, to care for them, set work for their students to do. They tried their best. Learning in the country continued. Moving forward, these online teaching competencies could well stick and paving the way for pedagogical advancement. Teachers now have a better sense of what technological tools can do and what they cannot provide. This is a great opportunity for us to evaluate what has worked, what has not, and what can work better using an online approach. So online learning has worked during the pandemic because there was no other option. But that does not mean that this is necessarily an optimal or sustainable solution for all learners. Therefore, moving forward, we are capitalizing on the fact that teachers are now much more familiar with online tools to move towards blended learning. Some regular home-based learning done online will complement classroom lessons. During such home-based learning periods, students will take charge of their own learning and engage in some topics outside of the regular curriculum. So note that blended learning is not about technology. It is tapping on technology to help students develop higher capacity for independent learning and learning beyond what is normally covered in the school curriculum. But to achieve this goal, then teachers actually require higher levels of lesson design and facilitative skills. Because if home-based learning is not well designed and facilitated, then for some students, at least for some of these students, it will merely mean either free time or confused time at home. So we know that we need to put in a lot more effort into helping our students to become better, independent learners using a blended approach. But to move towards blended learning, we need to do more to bridge the digital divide. During our circuit breaker, the home-based learning experience was quite uneven among students depending on family situations. Disadvantaged families did not have computers or enough devices to be shared among all the children. Others could not find enough space in their small flat to create a conducive learning environment. So in response to this digital divide in the country, the Ministry of Education announced that all secondary school students would receive a personal laptop or tablet for learning by 2021 this year. Now, the plan was already in place before the pandemic, but the target date was brought forward by 7 years. This is a very positive step, considering the enormous economic challenges that my country is currently facing. But this is a necessary step, and only one step out of many. I think as a country, we are trying very hard in this area and committing resources so that no child will be left behind. So let me move on to some of our timeless constants. We're willing to stick with some very basic principles that are important. These are also, to me, our success factors. The pandemic has changed a lot of things, but the mission of education in Singapore has not changed. It is always to mold the future of the nation. Teachers continue to lead, care, and inspire their students. The way to do it may need to change, but the mission has not. There are great things in the education system that we should affirm during the journey of change. Firstly, we do have a robust education system, and we should avoid knee-jerk reactions in reforming it. Today, we are hit by the coronavirus. If we simply react by shifting all education online, tomorrow we can be hit by a computer virus. So there is a time to change quickly, to adapt to changing circumstances. There is also a time to change in a steady, reflective, and balanced manner. COVID-19 is a great disruption, but it is not the only challenge to come. Therefore, we are using this opportunity to construct a robust system for the long-term future and not just to solve problems for now. But avoiding knee-jerk reactions, while doing so, we must continue in the spirit of timely change. In dealing with COVID-19, we take the opportunity to change positively. Next, we must continue to affirm that teachers, school leaders, schools are key contributors to our nation's success. Schools matter. They are places for children to learn and to build relationships in a safe environment. School leaders and teachers matter. They are the ones who make school work. So we continue to invest in our teachers. It is therefore heartening to me that even when our economy has been hit really hard, teachers will receive more support for professional development in line with a national lifelong learning movement called Skills Future, so that they can better meet the evolving needs of the students. So, this has been a philosophical constant in our education system since our independence. In Singapore, education is investment, not expenditure. We do not begrudge funding to leave no child behind, to help students learn, and to help teachers become better educators. Education is investment, not expenditure. COVID-19 may stay for a while, but it will eventually go away. However, Singapore's education system continues to be the bedrock for our nation-building journey, one that leads, hopefully, to a more prosperous, gracious, and resilient society. Crises have been a catalyst of change in the past. Singapore has always had the gumption to survive and to reinvent itself. My generation turned out okay because the previous generation went through the hardships to build the foundation for us. Having benefited from the sacrifices of the previous generation, this generation shall carry the sacrifices. This generation will do so, triggered by COVID-19 or otherwise. We will sacrifice for the benefit of the next generation. Because in Singapore, education is the human enterprise of paying it forward. And in Singapore, educators are people who plant trees so that others can sit under those trees and no one knows who planted them in the first place. So let's appreciate our teachers. Thank you, and I wish you all the best in your own educational change. So Anna, back to you.
Thank you so very much for this very insightful but also moving presentation. You've touched on many points that I'd like to circle back to later in our conversation, but before we do that, maybe we can zoom out a little. And you've talked about, on the one hand, the Singaporean system being a work in progress, but with several timeless constants. And I was wondering, would you say that within the Singaporean educational system, and especially within kind of the policies and politics surrounding it, is there a common aim, a common societal aim that is always pursued? And if so, what is that aim?
Okay, so briefly, the aim is to mold the future of our nation. That's at the national level. And at the individual level, is to develop a good person and a good citizen. And if we can do that, then that is where we find hope for ourselves as a people.
So you would say this has been a constant aim kind of throughout the times, no matter what political leadership there was, this hasn't been affected by different political leaderships?
Yes.
Right. How important would you say such an aim is for an education system? How important is it for a country to have a clear aim, a clear goal that is pursued by everyone?
Well, I can only answer personally. I think it is very important to me personally. With a common aim, it brings everyone together. And although different people have different ideas about how things could be done, but if we all have common purpose, then our discussions, while different, will finally come together in a very forward manner because we all believe in the same purpose. And so different people have different ideas about how things can be done. That is actually good. The diversity of ideas actually can result in better actions. But the common purpose is what ties everybody together. We are not doing this for our own ourselves. We are doing this for our children, the next generation.
Thank you. I think Austria can definitely learn from that. Maybe we can dive into some of the topics that you've touched on in your presentation already.
Sure.
You talked about kind of the joy of school and the joy of learning, and only in 2020 you published an article on the paradox of student well-being, and I think this is definitely something that, as a European, as a Central European, when you think of East Asian education systems, the first thing that comes to mind is a very strict routine and, a lot of focus on, like you said before, results, etc. And in this article, you yourself say that it's often viewed as an academic pressure cooker. So I was wondering kind of where do you, as the Singaporean education system, stand on this paradox now? What side does it fall on at the moment? Is it the student well-being or the results?
Okay. So I think the paradox is that there are multiple pictures and they seem contradictory, but they are all real and they are all valid pictures. Okay. So like any other kind of educational change, there is a transition. So in Singapore, at least this is what I observe, there will be people who are very much still exam-driven and highly exam-oriented, results-oriented. But there will also be some who are much more driven by intrinsic motivation, and therefore they are not, it's not to say that exams are not important, but they are not just simply thinking about exams. So we find that there's a whole spectrum of different pictures in between. So that is why sometimes if you come to Singapore, depending on who you speak with, and so you get one picture, but that is one valid picture, but it's not the complete picture. So I think there's a whole spectrum. That's simply because we are in transition.
Right, I see. And in your article, which I can only recommend to anyone listening in, because it's a very nice kind of brief overview on this topic that really gets you thinking, you speak of the social and emotional learning framework. To me, those words, then they don't often come up when you talk about education, at least in most cases. So I was wondering, maybe can you explain what the idea behind this social and emotional learning framework is and how it is being implemented?
Okay, so essentially the idea behind it is that there are different parts of learning. So holistic education means we look at a child holistically. So mathematics is important, languages is important. So language is important, mathematics is important, science is important. Okay, physical education, music, whatever, they are all important. But there is also this part about social emotional learning. That means they learn about how to manage themselves. They learn how to build relationships with others. Now this is also part of their learning. And so the social emotional learning framework is just a framework that tells us, teaches, some of the areas in which we are focusing on. And we are actually learning from many other countries. Such ideas did not originate in Singapore. I don't think so. Actually, it is Singapore going out to learn from many other countries. Now, but it doesn't mean that they are new. For many, many years, we have had those. It's just that in more recent years, we are able to be a lot more deliberate and clear about what we mean by putting it into a framework. So what we are really saying is this: when children grow up, we hope that they will grow up holistically into very wholesome young people. So it is not just the academic side, but it is also the social emotional side of things. So that is what we are trying to do in Singapore.
That sounds really interesting, and it speaks to me as today a representative of Talente blühen, because our initiative has this idea that every child should have the right and the possibility to become whatever it can be. And I think this holistic approach kind of speaks to that. It's more than just learning about maths, etc. And I think, speaking of individuality, you pointed that out in your presentation as well. There's some kids that might be more interested in mathematics, some that might be more interested in languages. And I really liked your example about the pianist playing kid, piano playing kid with Mozart. So I was wondering, I feel like in education there's always this trade-off between individuality and standards. Whenever we say we want a kid to develop individually, we then are scared that it will lose some standard skills that we think are needed. So I was wondering, where do you fall on that paradox as well, and what is the Singaporean answer to that?
Okay, so it's not like we have a very good answer, okay, to everything. I don't. But maybe from this perspective, or at least from my own perspective, they are not necessarily trade-offs, in the sense that one cannot be achieved if we are pursuing the other. Okay? The idea is to have this balance. That is to say, in a lot of it, or at least in my education system, this is what we are trying to do right now, is to open up a lot more pathways for young people, educational pathways. Now, years ago, Singapore wasn't that developed. It is not just about education, it's about the whole national trajectory. So when we first had our education, our independence, and then of course with the development of our education system, our educational pathways were limited because those were the only things that we could do with what we had at that time. So students, they do not have that many choices. And therefore, definitely, some will feel that I'm not a person who is that academically inclined. All right. Yeah. But there aren't that many other pathways for me. So one of the things that we are trying to do is really to build the different pathways and get kids to be able to find the pathway that they are really, one, interested in, have the talent for, or the aptitude for, and they can find success in their own way. Now, that success is not going to be all equal, but we feel that with children provided with more educational pathways, they will have a chance, a much better chance than before, of finding success in their own terms. If they are motivated, they love what they are learning, then they will become much more successful in the future. So that is what we think. Okay? And if that is the case, then we are not sacrificing standards. They're achieving more. They're not achieving less. We are achieving less because the kid is not interested. And we say that, no, you must achieve this standard. But if the kid is interested in the first place, they say that that low standard is not what I'm aiming for in the first place. I want to be better than that. Now, that is the sort of education system that we ought to design and have.
That sounds good. I just got the first question, but before I get to that,
Sure.
just a quick follow-up, because I was just thinking, particularly with, for example, maths is always the perfect example, isn't it? Because there's so many kids that don't like maths. And at least in some discussions, there's often this idea that it isn't necessarily about the content, it's not necessarily about the subject, but maybe just the different styles of learning. So I was wondering, is there room within the Singaporean educational system for individuality with regards to the style of learning and the type of learning?
Okay, so different students learn differently. That is true. But in this area, then we are moving forward in this way, at least as of now. Okay, at least as of now, we still have the school, the classroom, and the teacher. Yeah. All right. So I'm just being very practical here. Yeah. Okay. I'm not talking about some ideal state. Okay. We're talking about the teacher, the classroom, the school, okay, and the kid. So differentiated instruction. That means we have to help our teachers, and that is where the investment in professional development comes in. Help the teachers such that they are able to tailor their teaching and learning to better address the learning needs of the class. Now, therefore, one of our key strategies is not the only one, but one of the key strategies is that we have to invest in our teachers. If teachers have got multiple ways of teaching the class, then certain techniques will work better with certain kids. That is to say, do you have a few ways of explaining the same concept, or do you actually just have that one way? If this one way doesn't work for this kid, is there another way in which we could get this across to the kid? But that bit is a matter of professional skills. The second bit to us, or maybe to me personally, is even more important. Why? Because again, just being practical, many kids, when you talk to them, okay, especially when they are very young kids in primary school, you ask them, what subject do you like? And the kids say, I like mathematics. Let's just assume. Why do you like mathematics? Oh, because I like Miss Lee. Now, it has got nothing to do with mathematics per se. It's everything to do with Miss Lee, because Miss Lee is very good, Miss Lee is very caring, and so on. Therefore, the main thing is this. The teacher is the one that makes the whole class comes alive. We hope that our teachers are so good at their subject area and also building relationships with their students that the students will be inspired in that subject. A lot of kids, of course not everyone, but a lot of kids, if you ask them, why do you like this particular subject? And then finally you go into secondary school or beyond and want to do much more in this subject. Their story could be because there was this very interesting teacher that I met in the past. And some students really hate a subject right from young. Why? Because my teacher really bore me to death in this subject. And therefore, to us, teachers are very important.
That does sound very familiar, to me at least, I have to say. And I think I just got a question in that does fit this topic in a way. So maybe I can just read it to you.
Sure.
So Singapore, as a multinational and multilingual country, how do you deal with questions of integration and the lack of English-speaking skills of some of the students?
Okay. So again, one, it is a lot of investment on the part of the country. So for those kids whose background is such that they lack the natural environment to practice English, then we have special programs at primary school, okay, to really lift them up. So these are provisions from the country, special programs to help these kids. Okay? So that's one. Two, it is also part of our citizenship and character education. Okay? So the integration, it is not just about language skills, it is about respect, mutual respect. Singapore is a multi-racial country. A lot of different peoples are actually living together on this island. Therefore, one of the key things that we educate right from young is this idea. It's not about tolerance. It is about respecting one another. So that's the difference. Tolerance means that I kind of don't like you, but I can tolerate you. Respect means you are different from me, but we are all people who live together. And you and I, we can live harmoniously together. And let me make friends with you and let you make friends with me. So I think those are the sort of things that are important in my country.
Can I follow up on that and just ask, do you see that in results as well? In the sense that in a lot of countries, especially children from immigrants or with an immigration background, they don't fare as well in the education system. Do you see a similar thing in Singapore, or is this pretty much all on the same level?
Okay, so I would say that generally speaking, okay, if whether it's immigration or it's just local population without the kind of natural language environment, I think in our schools we always provide that support. So we do not actually make a big distinction. I think so long as there are students in our school, the school has this special program, and it is an initiative on the part of the country. So it's national policy, okay, that we have special programs to really, uplift these kids from young. Okay.
All right. Thank you so much. I have another question that kind of circles back to this idea of the different educational pathways. So one of our listeners, Diana, asks, what do these different pathways look like? Can you maybe give an example of how we can imagine those developing?
Okay. So again, I'm only talking about Singapore system. Okay. Now, I think the difference between Singapore and some other countries, like for example yours, would be such that I'm quite sure that if your football team doesn't do too well, I think you guys would be quite upset, right?
We are quite upset that they're not doing well.
well, in Singapore, the thing is that we only come to more recent history where we could now open more special schools, like schools catered for the arts, sports schools, etc. Okay, because for 50 years, that's all the history that we have since our independence. Okay, we had our independence in 1965, so we are just 50 something years old. Okay? So it is a matter of national trajectory. So for quite some time, our system is rudimentary, and it's just to cater to some very basic so that we can develop our economy, our people have got work to do, and so on and so forth. And so now we are opening up many different pathways by which we mean that sports, arts, different types of arts, okay, because it's not just arts, it's not just music, it's digital or whatever it could be, movie making and things like that, could all find a pathway and a way that we can celebrate their success. And so these are the different sort of pathways that I'm talking about. The second thing is this subject-based kind of banding, by which it means this at the school level, but I will not go into the details of how that is done. But we are allowing students who could progress faster in a certain subject to progress faster in that particular subject. In the past, it used to be that, okay, we are all, let's say, secondary two. And so you and I, we are all secondary two, and so we are all take subjects that progress at the speed of secondary two, something like that, But now, let's say I am actually good in language, but I am not good in mathematics. Now, could I actually progress much faster in language and perhaps a little slower in mathematics? So now we have designed a system to make that possible. Okay, so different kids could say, I would like to play up to my strengths rather than always trying to keep up with some of the areas that I'm not so good with. So for some of these areas, some very minimal standards could still be met. But at the end, I know that I'm not going to be a scientist. I know that I'm not going to be a mathematician. I need some basic maths and science. But I would love to be a pianist. Okay. So go a lot faster in music. So that's what we are trying to design.
So could I summarize it by saying there's almost two different ways of different pathways in the sense, or two levels of it within school, kind of have individual pathways within one school, but also kind of starting to create different pathways in different types of schools?
Yes, okay. In different types of schools, as in like different types of schools, yes. Different pathways nationally.
But also within school, in a way.
And within school as well. Okay, so within school, different pathways nationally. Okay, maybe just one more example is that many years ago, everything will be based on results. To go to a certain school will be usually based on results. Now, actually, we have something called basically direct admissions. That is to say, there's a certain percentage of vacancies in the school that the school can decide to take in students based on their special aptitude. So it's not absolutely based on academic results.
I see.
Okay, so that broadens the diversity as well.
I see. Well, Dan, I hope this answered your question. If not, just let us know in the comments and I'll follow up with one. Maybe something that I would be interested in on touching before we kind of come to a close. In your book, Learning from Singapore, which we saw in your presentation, which again, I can only recommend to anyone listening in, it's a very good read. You speak of the 4 dreams for the best education system, and you point to different actors within the system. You speak of schools, teachers, students, but also parents. And I was wondering, particularly the parent side of you, how can parents be more involved in school, or how can parents be more thought into the whole education system on a policy level?
I think, at least in my country, we start off with this. The idea is that hopefully every parent will be a supportive partner of the school and of the teacher. So it is a cultural shift. It's not easy. I think parents are interested in their children, in their children doing well. So the question is, now what do you do? There are a few sort of things that we are trying to both encourage and then certain things discourage. Encourage will be take an interest, encourage your children, ask them to pursue their dreams, rather than, and this is the part to discourage, give them pressure, give them a lot of pressure so that they will live out your dreams, not theirs. We are very concerned about parents getting children to live out the parents' dreams for them, rather than having children who have a dream of their own and would really like to proactively, positively, pursue their dreams. So one, parents, allow your children, to find themselves in their life. Encourage them, support them. Then 2, work with their teachers. Trust the teachers. Trust that teachers are people who love your child as well. So sometimes parents and teachers may not see eye to eye, or rather the parent may say, hey, why are you doing this? It's okay to have a different opinion. So in Singapore, what we try to encourage is, don't just simply take this and complain or whatever. Go and have a word with the teacher. Come to a mutual understanding. But sometimes by talking, you may realize that, hey, so what the teacher is trying to do is actually a good thing. Or, oh, there are certain things that my kid is doing in school in which I do not actually observe at home. Or the teacher didn't quite know this, that the child was like that at home. And so by that mutual conversation, the teacher got a more complete picture and therefore is able to handle your child or manage your child much better at school. So on that part, the main message is this: trust the teachers, work with the school. We all love the child and hope that the child will have a good life ahead. So that's the main message.
So just encourage the conversation and bring the parents into this conversation with the teachers.
Yes. Of course, the school can organize things to get the parents in, but I think all over the world, schools are trying to do that.
Yes, that is true. Well, this has been so fascinating. I think both getting this kind of overview of what the Singaporean system is actually about, but also thank you for allowing us to kind of dive into some of the topics more intently. I think for me, the big takeaway is this idea of almost gaining power out of these paradoxes that otherwise make you kind of stop the progress, rather use those paradoxes in order to grow and get to another place, to a better place where students have fun in school, where they have this joy of learning. And it sounds to me that you don't just encourage students to learn, but also teachers and in some way, therefore, society as a whole. I was wondering whether you maybe have a closing remark that you want to leave us with today.
Okay, so to the audience, I would say that let us be very, very serious and supportive about education. Instead of complaining, let us be very positive. I think we need a very positive narrative about education rather than a negative one. Encourage the teachers. And we hope that by doing so, actually good people will want to become teachers. And isn't that a great thing for any country to have very good people as teachers? So maybe I leave with just this remark that I made just now. At least in my country, this is what we think. Teachers are people who plant trees so that others sit under those trees and no one knows who planted those trees in the first place. So encourage your teachers, respect your teachers. And for those who hope to become teachers and are teachers, then let me encourage you, try your best, do well, because we're not doing this for ourselves, but for the next generation. So all the best to your own educational change. Thank you, Anna.
Thank you, Pak Tee. Thank you so much for taking the time to talk with us. I could continue talking to you for the rest of the day. I think it's so fascinating, and anytime you say something, questions keep rolling in for myself and also our audience. But unfortunately, we're going to have to close this discussion now. But as I said before, I can only recommend to any of you, read up on the system. It's really interesting, and I think there's a lot more to be said, and Pak Tee has said those things in different articles, so I can only recommend you go out and read them. This has been so fascinating and encouraging, and thank you so much for taking the time to be with us today. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Anna.
Thank you.
Thank you.